Welcome back, everybody, to the BRUBBLE podcast, a podcast gathering young voices and perspectives from in and around the Brussels bubble. Today, we have a bit of our Christmas special, or, end-of-year wrap-up, our roundup episode, where we're going to be going over the top 10 most important political stories from in and around the Brussels bubble, as, we're situated here. So, the way it's going to take form is that each one of us has compiled a 1 to 10 top 10 list of 1 being the most important story and 10 still being important but not quite as important as number 9. You get the idea. We haven't seen each other's list. We're going to present our list, give our reactions, and then collectively make a top 10. And if this sounds confusing, just stick around, I promise. It's pretty easy. But before we get into it, we have to introduce ourselves. If you've been watching a bit, maybe you know us, but maybe not. Should we start on the left-hand side there, Joao?
Okay, thank you. So my name is João Pontes. I'm Portuguese and I'm working as a policy assistant at DG GROW, the European Commission. I deal with the Recovery and Resilience Plan and the European semester. I would like to say to you all, please stick with us because this one is going to be amazing. I'm really looking forward to it.
There we go. Julien, who are you? What do you bring to this world?
Who am I? What do I do? Hi guys, I'm Julien Oez. I'm a French political specialist who focuses on geopolitics and European political behavior. And I'm also a representative for Emmanuel Macron's party, Renaissance, here in the Benelux. And I'm looking forward to this episode. It's going to be a fun time, even if there are questions about what it is I do in general. But it's going to be fun.
Yeah, you're always the French expert in the Brussels bubble, I suppose.
And we always have opinions.
There we go. Yeah, and I guess it's gotten to me. I'm Simon. I'm not affiliated with a political party. I work for Microsoft here in the Brussels bubble in government affairs, and I'm Dutch-Canadian, so I bring some transatlantic perspective is what I like to call it. And I kind of host this podcast of ours.
Thank you for that. My name is Nikoas and I'm 25. I come from Greece. I work in the European Commission as well, in the Secretariat General, writing briefings for the President, the Vice Presidents, and the Secretary General. However, here I come to speak out of my own accord and just share some thoughts with friends. I also couldn't wait for this one and can't wait to get started on this. I think it's going to be really fun. 2022, a year with an insane amount of political developments that really took me just a few hours to sit down and try to mentally map everything. So we unfortunately only had to pick 10. These are not the only issues that have marked the world, but I can't wait to hear...
So, we've each prepared a top 10 list. Should we go through the table? Do you want to start, Nikos? Because I came to you last.
Yeah, why not?
Take a few seconds, go through your top 10, 1 being the most important, 10 being, still important, but not as important as number 9, as people understand it. You'll read through it, take a few seconds, and then I'll read through mine, et cetera, and we'll give some reactions as you go along,
So I want to reiterate that this is not an exhaustive list, and it's not a top 10 list based on certain objective criteria. This is fully subjective, so please just roll with me. So for those who may have heard episode 1 and 2, you won't be surprised by number 10. So developments in the Eastern Mediterranean, and I am very happy to analyze that more once we start talking. So that's number 10. Number 9, Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, which is sort of ongoing, but it's definitely an interesting story to see unfold. Then I'm going to say the whole saga with the funding cuts of Hungary on the basis of the rule of law, as well as the Recovery and Resilience Plan. For number 7, I've put Brazil elections plus. The reason I put the plus was because they weren't the only really important elections, and I'm going to get to that in a bit. But I think they had massive global ramifications. Then we had the midterm elections in the U.S., the red wave that sort of came but never really did. Number 5, I'm going to go with food security or insecurity. Number 4, big and historic developments in the Chinese Communist Party and the Congress that they held at their for the 20th National Congress. Number 3, NATO expansion. Number 2, energy insecurity, and this one is predominantly for Europe. I think this one is clear bias towards Europe, but I understand that. And number 1, I think we can all agree that the war in Ukraine has had shattering ramifications all across the world.
I like your list. I will admit there are some hot takes in there because I made a little graphics for this as we go along. I didn't put Brazil in the top 20.
Yeah, I noticed, and you didn't even put it as like extras.
I had it in extras, but I think I forgot to put it down the list, so it was on my mind.
Okay.
But I like how you made all the way to number 7 in yours. Any initial reaction to his list too? Julien, you seem appalled by almost.
No, that's just me being French and being very aggressively disappointed in everybody all the time. But no, it's just I'm quite surprised that the National Congress of the CCP made it so high actually, because
I agree with you on this one though. I will say.
I want to understand why, because I don't think it was actually that important, to be honest.
My logic to defend this for you, sorry to jump in, is that for me it represents all the Chinese developments happening this year, as it's really the consultation, the consolidation of Xi Jinping's power that really happened in that ceremony.
The consolidation, but also like the zero COVID policy,
Yep.
and now what we're seeing, which is basically protest in China for the first time in a very, very long time. So let's hear out your list first, and then we can, we can get into this.
Don't worry, that's.
I'll do mine first. I'll do mine first.
Oh,
because
yes, please go
table
for it.
goes along like this. Don't forget the somewhat Canadian man here.
I'm just really surprised, Nikos, that you picked the war in Ukraine as your first option.
I know, right?
I think that's foreshadowing, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
The one thing I am surprised about your list, you forgot one.
I said this list is not exhaustive.
Okay. You'll see. So for my number 10 is Hungary, the rule of law violations. I agree on that side. My number 9 is the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. I was tempted to put it higher, but I was thinking from the bubble perspective, My number 8 is one I forgot to give to you guys because it only become popular in the last few days. The Inflation Reduction Act of America.
Ooh, okay, I like that.
Which,
Yeah.
you see why I still think it
Well, foreshadow.
my number 7 is food security. My number 6 is the Conference on the Future of Europe, because I think that has some interesting developments which will play out for the decade to come, to be honest, in my opinion. So I'll give Macron some props here. My number 5 is NATO expansion. My number 4 is inflation. My number 3 is EU enlargement, which did not even get a mention in the side of the
But
table.
did we really enlarge?
I mean, not yet, but we accept new candidate states. I think that's pretty important. And number 2 is energy security, and number 1 is Ukraine, or the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. I just sense your collection here of your thoughts.
No, you've actually made me reconsider my own list, actually.
That's why before you reconsider, give me your list right now.
Yeah. No, it's
Don't
just
give him time to think.
The Inflation Reduction Act is actually a really good.
Yeah.
I actually thought of that myself.
No. I actually thought about that, but let's.
It only came up in my thinking, I think, yesterday or so, because that's when the real headlines
when they
started
started
breaking.
popping up.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was reading The Economist today, half of it is just on the Inflation Reduction Act. It's crazy. And I think it's going to influence our rhetoric for so much time to come.
Yes.
But,
Yes.
For sure. No, I mean,
but we'll do it in our collective list.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in a second. But okay, so from my side, I had Conference on the Future of Europe at number 10, purely because of the fact that I think it's important, but it's going to go either way. And it could either be a disaster long term, or just be forgotten very quickly, or be positive, which is, in my opinion, the least likely part of it. Inflation for sure is number 9, and this could have been higher, but I was thinking, it's not as important as some other things. NATO expansion was my number 8, purely because of a realization that Europe had, and NATO in general, which was quite, from a political side, very funny. In general, just because of the fear that we had for Russia, with Russia in general, and the fact that it didn't really, what we feared didn't materialize when we pulled the trigger.
But I will say it's the
Yeah.
biggest moves in foreign policy for Sweden and Finland in their history.
Of course.
Yeah.
For them, it was huge.
Regardless.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Eventually. Number 7 for me was EU enlargement, because while we haven't, let's say de facto enlarged yet, because it's still just accession processes being triggered, in principle, it's a pretty big move. I mean, 2 of the easternmost states in Europe who have joined the accession process, who I don't think will end up like Turkey.
Okay, but Turkey is special.
Turkey is always special in your heart.
That's why you have it for Thanksgiving.
Sure. Go on, Julien. I'm gonna like you right now.
So the US midterms made my number 6 purely because I think it's actually impacted EU-US relations long term.
Really?
Because I think it's actually done a lot of damage to Donald Trump and
I guess from that
that
perspective,
push. But we'll get to that in a second.
I would have said it would have made my top 10 if the red wave happened.
No, I think
I
the fact that
agree.
it didn't happen had a big impact actually.
Yeah.
Regardless,
Yeah.
we'll get to it.
Yeah. And European political community made my number 5. Listen, I'll get to it. It's not just me being French, I promise. Hungary rule of law funding cuts, number 4, because the Commission finally...
I like that.
The EU collectively grew some balls and decided to actually do something, which is phenomenal in my view. Chapeau, everyone. The DMA made my number 3, because that's going to have a huge impact. And I will get to that why, but I was actually disappointed that it wasn't on the actual list we were given. I felt personally just...
I mean, I do work for a tech company, but go on.
Yes, just because just the impact is going to... I mean, we'll get to it in a second, but just how impactful it's going to be is
Fair
so impressive to me. Number 2 is energy security, because, I mean, we've all checked our bills, to be honest, and it's not very nice. And my number 1 is actually the French elect. I'm joking.
Could be. I mean, it's
Listen,
fair enough.
I'm not that stereotypical. No, for me, number 1 was the illegal Russian invasion, not the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine. The illegal Russian invasion.
The French always have to one
Yeah.
the commission,
Listen,
one
we
up the
have
commission,
to-
you know?
We have to call it what it is, and like
I do agree.
everybody's gonna say here today, to be honest, it has changed so much about how Europe and everybody's doing business in general.
Okay.
It can't be outside number 1.
Mhm.
Okay, fair enough. Some interesting takes there. I see you don't care for the climate whatsoever, but
No, I hated it.
Well,
Cool.
now the pressure is on me to place Ukrainian war, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine in first place, huh? So that I do not distone from you guys. But let's start from my number 10 first. So the enlargement. My 9th position is Italian elections, then
Okay,
French elections, then US midterms. So you can see that I like elections because I like the outcomes of it and what we can extrapolate from it. On the 6th place, inflation. On the 5th place, German defense policy.
I need to be one hipster here.
On 4th place, NATO expansion. On 3rd place, food security. On 2nd place, energy security. And on 1st place, of course, like you guys, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine.
Interesting.
We all have the same top 2.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna lock those in right now for us. So I'm gonna keep a tally running here.
Okay, but which ones are you going
But-
to lock?
The Russian war of aggression in 1, energy
Okay.
security in 2. We're all agreed on that. But
Yeah.
but as I do that, what do we think of each? Who do we think had the best list between us? Just off the top of the bat, if you could only choose one of these to survive.
Nikos, you cannot vote on yourself, huh?
I was trying to talk myself out of it.
I mean, I think Joao had potentially the most political top 10, actually. Not just because of the elections, but because you picked a lot of where the diplomatic focus
Mhm,
was over the last 12 months.
Very European.
And very
Also very
security
European.
focused
Yeah.
too. It's
Yeah.
very security and elections.
Yes, pretty much. I also liked very much yours, Julien. It's in a way it's similar to mine. I mean, we have a
Yeah.
lot of stuff in common here. We just rearranged some positions, but
I mean, to
Yeah.
be fair, Simon told us pick these.
yeah. I did this.
Yeah.
And just
I mean, if I just let you go wild, I'd have no idea what to come back. So, okay, well, I think it's hard to pick a winner, but collectively we will make a winner.
Let's
And that's
do
what
it.
we're gonna do here. And I think the call from around us has been to go from bottom up. However, looking that we've decided on the top 2 already, is it maybe not easier to do number 3? That was my argument, Joao, before recording.
well,
Maybe we, but it's more interesting to go from the
from
bottom
top,
up.
yes,
Yeah.
I would still stick for the bottom up.
I mean, I would even
Approach.
say, why don't we eliminate the ones that we don't think were that in the top 10? I mean, like, the Human Rights Abuse World Cup should probably be eliminated from the list entirely because it's...
Yeah, and also like the death of Queen Elizabeth. I'm not taking away from it, but like age is something natural. So
Mhm.
and there was a pretty smooth succession of the monarchy. So I don't think it was as groundbreaking as some others.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just for reference, we have a list of like 20 options here, the top 20, and we're just gonna delete a few, but also maybe add a few, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'd even say the UK, because you had the UK Prime Minister merry-go-round, which I understand that is quite important, but it also really wasn't. It was kind of just an extension of the election that wasn't overseen by the overzealous. Well, actually, no, it's the previous leadership election that hit reality really hard. And everybody realized that typically, when you're running populist elections in a semi-sensible state, checks and balances come in quite hard.
I don't know. In a way, I didn't, and I did see it coming. I mean, there was a live stream on YouTube about whether a lettuce would outlive Liz Truss as a prime minister, and well, I haven't seen that for any other world leader, so that should fill in a few of the gaps, but not all.
I will say, I think, like teleporting yourself 2 years into the future, we will have forgotten that Liz Truss ever existed, and I think that kind of says a lot. Most people will assume it just went Johnson to Sunak, sorry.
And plus, she's the shortest serving prime minister ever. Like, she beat all records, so she's just going to be a footnote in history. Like, potentially the worst thing for a politician. She will just be a line.
Would she be deserved that honor of being a footnote?
Yeah, I agree, because it's more than most people can.
No, exactly.
Your full goal is to be a footnote. I can see here.
No.
I mean, you're not running to replace Ursula.
No,
I mean, what, you don't want to be the next Vondi?
I have full and unrelenting trust in the leadership of the European Commission.
Okay, so on that note, we will sadly delete the UK Prime Minister merry-go-round as quickly as Liz Truss got deleted from that office.
Can you please just play a tiny violin?
Exactly.
While
the boat
hear it
is
though, because it's the world's
sinking,
tiniest violin.
And also, maybe, why not scrapping COVID-19?
I was going to make a case for concluding this, because in my opinion, do you still
Yes,
recall we
I
had
will
lockdowns beginning of the year still?
Yes, I will just going to
We
point
did?
that out.
Yeah.
When?
Beginning of the
sorry?
year, I had lockdowns.
Yeah, we had lockdowns.
We worked from home till like February.
Yeah.
We did? No.
Yeah.
We still had some restrictions. I think when I came back to Brussels, I still have some restrictions, but we were working from at the office normally.
I mean, I think
when we met. But I mean, it's just a small case. It's just a small thing. That, and of course, the zero COVID policy on China. It's nowadays
but that's
a big topic. But it is not. I mean, you can actually fit that into your top 10, but not the COVID-19 situation per se.
I still say most news websites still have a COVID-19 page. It says something about how dominant this issue is.
We were talking about
site.
footnotes, weren't we?
yes.
But
No, I don't think it's become irrelevant. I just think because like war has returned in Europe, NATO is expanding at the border of Russia,
And so are COVID cases. If you actually check the statistics. So are the COVID cases. They're actually going up.
They are, but the deaths are not the same that they were 2 years ago, because obviously we've developed through vaccination quite a strong immunity as a population. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that this is not important. I just think on the basis of what year we're living through, I think COVID has sort of been forced to fall down our list also because like there's fatigue.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
could we mark an argument to put it at number 10, just because it has been the paradigm in the background?
I'm not sure we could, and I think, I mean, there's always that joke that's been going around all the institutions that, or even just globally in general, that the minute that Russia illegally invaded Ukraine, always say that, COVID just kind of stopped existing. Like, people forgot to wear masks, people forgot that vaccinations were going to be coming with boosters eventually. I mean, I understand your point just based on the fact that zero COVID, well, both your points actually, that zero COVID is still an important policy right now. But I would say we could actually wrap that up within the 20th National Congress rather than having COVID itself on its own.
Yeah,
I don't think it really makes sense anymore to really have it as one of the top things in Europe happening in 2022.
Okay, instead of arguing why it shouldn't be, why don't we argue what should be?
So let's eliminate COVID then right now.
Yeah.
I mean, both in the real
That
world
was my
as well
motion,
as
so
somewhere else. Sadly,
passes.
COVID has been defeated from the top 10, which I do kind of disagree with, but regardless, what do we think? You're making a case that something should be on the list. Give me one that you think needs to be on the list right away.
Okay, so I put number 10, the Eastern Mediterranean.
Instantly goes for the one that nobody else has. But go on, make your case. You have
You
your
had
your spotlight.
the conference, and
Julien had that
I
too.
had the conference.
He had it like number 5.
yeah, and 6. Okay, this has a lot to do with not just Turkey, but also Libya, the maritime agreement between Israel and Lebanon, which was very historic. What's happening in Cyprus? The fact that Greece, for the first time in its history, is doing research to see if there is natural gas off the coast of Crete to the west. Obviously, Turkey again is at war. It's always been at war, but it's bombing again the Kurds. What's happening in Egypt with the COP and everything. There's a lot of things going around in the Eastern Mediterranean right now that shows that, number one, it's a very, very critical juncture for the world and the European Union. For the European Union, because it's just where Europe meets the borders of the Middle East and essentially the continent of Asia, as well as Africa, both inland and in sea, inland and sea with Asia, so Turkey, and at sea with Africa.
I mean, to add fuel to your fire, they had a war there with Armenia, Azerbaijan, I believe. They had
Yes. I don't know if that. I thought about saying it, but I don't know if that falls under.
I had it in my top 30.
Eastern Mediterranean. I wouldn't say that.
Does that fall under the Eastern Mediterranean? It doesn't
Yeah,
really, does
I
it?
don't know if.
But then you
it
have to be
does.
really limited in what you mean. Because if you expanded it that far, I would be like, okay. But right now, I don't know. It's just
I'm
not
happy to expand
on my
it
radar.
that far. I'm just not sure if you guys see it like that.
I would say that the Eastern Med has been important, but I would actually say it's been most important in relation to the war in Ukraine, or the invasion of Ukraine, purely because it's been where a lot of the grain shipments have been traveling through.
Yeah.
Food
And-
security exists.
And food
Yeah.
security
Say
as well.
that, yeah.
I mean, I would hesitate to make it to some point because at least this year, because I know what you mean about the increasing conflict in the region and the shale gas exploration and all of these things, but I feel like those ones in my top 10. I would put those in my top 20 because they were really, compared to all the big things that happened this year, I would actually say they were quite secondary to a lot of the other things that happened. In my view, at least. I mean, I don't have Musk's shenanigans in my top 10. I wouldn't even put it in my top 20, for example. But the Eastern Med and all the situations happening there, quite a few of them would make their way into my top 20 at least.
Yeah.
Well, no, don't get me wrong, Nikos. I totally respect your argument. Actually, in one of our in one of our discussions, I
I'll
actually
put someone off,
seconded the importance of Eastern Mediterranean and the Turkey-Greek relationship and stuff like that.
And Cypriot.
And Cyprus. Yeah, if you want to add Cyprus, they also deserve to be in. But the thing is, I totally agree also with Julien. I don't think, at least in my perspective, although it is a very important region for us security-wise, not only food security-wise, but also energetic-wise, and also in terms of migration, I don't think it is important enough to be rested in this list.
So, any final thoughts before we pay funeral to it?
I will say
Relegate it to an
one-
honorary top 12.
Honorary, all right. I'll accept that. I will say one thing. The war in Ukraine, because you also connected it to, and the food shipments, the role that Turkey has played as a mediator, oil shipments, and everything. The war in Ukraine and Turkey's role in the war has had a severe impact and dent on the power and influence of Russia in the Middle East. The fact that they're taking equipment from Syria to Ukraine, the fact that Turkey is going against a lot of their strategic positions of Russia in Syria and in other policies, as well as with Armenia, we're seeing that number one, Turkey is rising as a big regional power, and Russia's influence is waning. It's becoming more and more isolated, and I think the Eastern Mediterranean shows that, and especially what's happening in Libya. But I'm happy to put it as it's not the hill I'm willing to die on.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you are, but we'll save that point for, I guess, our top predictions of 2023 list. Maybe we can do that for January, but
Yeah.
we'll see. We mentioned this during the last segment, or just a second ago. Food security. We all had it. Where do we think it should go?
Much higher.
Oh, much higher, definitely.
But where is much higher?
Mine is fifth place, actually.
I have
Mine is
mine
fifth
7.
as well.
I'm willing to go up to 5. Do you have an issue with it being at 5? Julien.
Coming from a Eurobubble perspective and a very Eurocentric point of view, I feel like it was maybe not actually, at least for Europe itself, it drove prices up certainly, and it caused problems with inflation for sure. But I think that food security itself, as in the specific transfer of food from Ukraine or Russia and these things, was actually more of an extra European problem. And it actually mostly had secondary effects in Europe.
I mean, you could also still argue the fertilizer crisis, which is going to impact farmers
Yes,
for
pretty much,
years
sure.
to come within
Pretty
Europe.
much.
There's ongoing famines throughout Africa, which is on our
Yes.
near borders, which is going to impact our international aid. There's
Yes.
all these things going on.
Yeah. But actually, in my opinion, I picked food security mainly not because of European reasons, but the impacts that it can have, like worldwide.
Oh no, yeah,
And
that-
migration-wise.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. Like
Yeah.
the conflicts that
Yes.
they can actually come to happen because internal conflicts in certain countries because of food scarceness, and we cannot forget about this. Like most of the African countries, as some of Asian countries, are reliant 50 to 100% on grain exported by Russia or by Ukraine. So, and this helps to explain most of their positions, for instance, in the UN,
yeah.
why they refuse to condemn or to have like a tougher approach on Russia war of aggression. So I think that's why, like, for the actual, it has perhaps marginal impacts on us. It raises some prices, of course, but the potential sidebacks and the potential spillovers that this can provoke to Europe from something that comes from third countries, it can actually be like trouble for the future.
But also add to that, so obviously the first one is like the humanitarian side, which I think goes absolutely as the top risk associated with the food security crisis that we're facing. Maybe we've gotten over like the really bad part, I think, because now there is some sort of exports, at least as unstable as there are some exports going on. It also showed how susceptible certain countries can be to anti-Western and anti-European propaganda on this.
Yeah.
Because let's be clear, there is one perpetuator of the global food insecurity in the world, and that person, whoever is responsible, has a name. It's Vladimir Putin. Because Ukraine certainly didn't choose to start a war. No one in Europe or the West wanted a war, and yet this was a completely, we can use all the words, unjustified, unprovoked, illegal, and so on and so forth, invasion of Ukraine. But at the end of the day, I was seeing that a lot of countries were turning their back on Europe as if Europe was somehow responsible for this, when in reality a lot of our aid was going to help a lot of countries that were suffering from this. And yet, even though some of that damage has been mitigated, I think it was scary for me to see just how susceptible the global viewpoint can be in a situation like this.
For sure.
So,
And if I can just
last
point out, because I see what you mean, I would have it in like 11th place just because of the importance it would have.
It's way too long.
But
I agree.
the reason why is that I would actually say that in terms of, if we're looking at it from a humanitarian point of view, I would have humanitarian affairs actually in my top 10, purely because it hits on food security, it hits on the issues in Yemen, it hits on a lot of the ongoing crises and conflicts in Africa and Asia, but also because of the fact that the world's basically turned a blind eye to everything that happened in Qatar to enjoy some football. And this is one of the reasons why I'd have human rights and humanitarian aid higher and food security lower, at least in general, purely because of the fact that people chose to take a stand on food security, which is rightly so, but they also ended up forgetting the other issues that are happening in the world and almost willingly try to ignore them if it meant that they could watch something fun on football television for a couple months. I mean,
we did have a Qatar World Cup category.
Yes.
Which we deleted right away.
Yes, because it's just the way it's being presented.
Yeah,
it's
I agree, but
sidelined,
I will also say when we're talking about like trans points or like, points that transcend boundaries, food security was also had its own session within COP27. It was one of the focus of COP27 for the first time ever. So my argument would be, since none of us seem to like COP27, we can also kind of lump that into food security. And hence, I think at least us, except for the Frenchmen, we're all in favor of putting it around 5, 6. And we can see where we go on.
Yeah, I agree.
Are you not, are we happy somewhat on this?
And actually, just taking this to the French side, actually, this food security crisis will put further strain on our necessity of reviewing the CAP.
Yes.
And this is so jumping from the world scenario to our internal European scenario. This is something that needs to be thought about. And also, just a quick side note, it will be interesting, since we mentioned, for instance, you mentioned the Brazilian elections. It would be interesting how would Brazil, in the more realistic point of view, try to explore, because they have comparative advantage on producing certain type of grains, to actually take advantage on this situation, like position themselves even higher. But now with the elections and Lula can come to power, let's see how he will fulfill his promises of protecting Amazon and the deforestation and being against deforestation.
Should we go to the elections then?
Yeah. Let's. Just on that note, it's difficult to be worse than his predecessor. On that, like zero respect for indigenous populations, unfortunately, zero respect for the environment. The Amazon is known as the lungs of the earth. Like, just overall, not again, from a strictly like as a global, not even a citizen, as an individual living on this planet, like you realize some things are just bad for this planet, and mistreating the Amazon rainforest is one of those things. Now, I put the Brazil elections, and I'll get to the plus in a minute. One of the really big feelings that I've had this year is that we've been living through a wave of populism for on and off for a while now, since the 2008 economic crisis. Especially for myself as a Greek, like we went through a lot of populism, a lot of political upheavals and whatnot. And I really feel that this year, democracy feels to be fighting back. And when I say democracy, I mean like people seem to be fighting back. They don't want the populists. Well, not everywhere, but they don't want. People seem to be willing to get out and fight, and you're getting this feeling that every vote counts. Now, why is the Brazil election so important? Well, number one, we're seeing the internationalization of Trumpian political methods of before you even lose an election, when you sense that you might lose an election, is like set the groundwork. Start making baseless claims. You can retweet www.nothing.nothing.nothing.eu.com or whatever, and still say that that's your source, and still people unfortunately will believe people in power because they see them, they look up to them. And again, we saw it now. We had 48 hours after the elections where everyone was like, what is going to happen? Will he concede? Will he not concede? In the end, he didn't really concede, but he said he would start the transition process. But on the other side, now again, he's saying that there's evidence and potentially there was some mysterious things that happened that led him to lose the election, and we see these methods being energetically adapted, these Trumpian methods, energetically adapted, not just in Brazil by Bolsonaro, but internationally. And I think this is why these elections were so important, because Brazil was really choosing on some more than just who will lead the country. It was a very fundamental part of the country's identity, I think.
I think the larger point you're speaking to is there's a perception that somehow we fought back against the right, in a sense. I don't know how much I agree with that, but we did see a lot of right-wing candidates stumble or not even be able to deliver on those right-wing agendas, kind of like Meloni in Italy.
My initial when drafting this, I wanted to put a bracket in of just right-wing, the fall of right-wing, or like the struggle of right-wing, something like that. I just want, sorry, Joao, just one small thing.
Go for it.
This, I don't think this has to do with leftist, rightist ideology. Like that plays a role, but I'm seeing that these people, they don't really have an ideology. Their ideology is quite a naked and blatant run for power, and that's why it's so important that we fight for democracy, we fight for the values, we fight as much as we absolutely can for the truth in our society, and we forget these leftist, rightist, centrists, and really look what is best for society.
I would like to make a statement on that, on the Brazilian front. I did not place it on my top 10. I would have placed it in my honorable mentions, but not for the same reasons as you. Mainly for international affairs than actually internal affairs. I don't believe that at all that democracy was fighting back in Brazil. Actually, if there was any display of bad use of democracy, was in the Brazilian elections. First, because of the former president, and then because of the way that the other party, PT, and Lula da Silva presented themselves. I mean, when you have a candidate, in this case Lula, that says that he is not going to present his program like days before the elections, because he needs to first be in power to present his program. I mean, what is this? Yeah. You are going to an election, to a democratic election selection, and you do not know who you are voting for. So the thing was, it was too much polarized in between two fields. Okay, we had on one side what we know about Bolsonaro, and we had on the other side a person that is championed in the European Union and in the West in general. But I mean, the first thing that he did, and he was promising that he was going to increase the expenditures, for instance, on education, which is important for that country, he reduced it more than 30%. Okay. Yeah. So let's just be real. So what happened there is a failure to democracy, not actually democracy fighting back. And just on my take on Brazilian elections, internationally it is very interesting. Yeah. Because what happened, and here I will follow Nikos, what happened was like a Trumpist more kind of approach, like bandwagging more with America, fostering bilateral agreements rather than multilateral consensus. And now with Lula, maybe we are going to see Brazil now pushing forward Latin American agenda, like more Mercosur. For instance, more intervention with the other Portuguese-speaking countries is important. And also have a different approach also towards the European Union. We will see how the agreement can actually unfold. So this brings a new whole of opportunities, multilateral-wise, and I will still rest to see if pragmatism in Brazil and realism in Brazil will speak louder than promises, because we know, if there is one thing that we know in politics, is unfortunately in 1 hour is one thing, in the other hour it is the complete opposite.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to agree on the fact that while it was good purely because Bolsonaro lost and a Trumpist candidate did lose, I agree with you on that point that it wasn't necessarily good because Lula also behaved in a very he was a populist. And the thing that lots of people forget is that he's actually a far left populist. It's something that he did quite frequently, and actually politically, people like to think that he's maybe more of an Olaf Scholz European-style socialist, but he's actually more of a Jean-Luc Mélenchon type left-wing. I mean, I'm not going to dictate what side of communism he's most likely to support, but he's on that side. And I just a segue into the other two elections, just so we can clear them out of the way as well eventually.
Okay, move on.
Yeah.
We're like 40 minutes in and we have three decided.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very cautious of people who say that the right is flailing or that the far right is losing or that it has lost. I mean, just to put it as someone who actually fought the elections in France, at least here in the Benelux, we weren't necessarily fighting against Marine Le Pen per se. We were mostly fighting against disaffection with politics in general, which meant that people were protest voting. And we saw in the first round that Le Pen has her supporters. We have our base as well in France, but then the left wing was so balkanized that at one point the main candidate fell over completely, got 1.2, 1.7% of the votes. And then because all of the socialist and ecologist parties felt that they weren't able to make their voice heard, they protest voted in favor of the far left Trotskyite, I can never say that word, candidate Mélenchon, who then used this to basically create an incredibly disruptive party that spends a lot of time yelling in parliament and disrupting policy. That's not necessarily the far right losing, that's more people protest voting. And I think that's one thing that people aren't necessarily aware of. In general, at least the people voting, we may be more aware, but it's the same thing in Italy. People didn't necessarily vote in favor of Meloni's program or Meloni's coalition. They voted against Movimento 5 Stelle's inability to actually make good on their former promises. They voted against the Partito Democratico, however they call it, who has a history of failing their promises. And they voted for the person who sold them this Trumpist dream, look, we're going to make Italy great again. And I think the lesson that lots of people haven't quite taken from this, and that I think that people really need to start paying attention to, especially considering the cycle we're running into right now, is that the EP elections are going to be quite similar. I mean, there's going to be a lot of protest voting, especially because people still have a misunderstanding of what Europe is, which is why hopefully this podcast helps contribute to a bit of understanding.
That's why Europe sometimes don't vote on the people don't vote on the European election, so the protest vote was actually translated into abstention.
Exactly.
Or they just protest vote on the basis of like
national politics.
Yeah, well, national politics, obviously, but they just vote on the basis of like, let's show the incumbent government who's really in charge, or let's show them that we don't like the direction.
Like a yellow card.
Yes.
Basically, yes.
Exactly. So it's basically our EU midterm elections, actually, you could probably even argue. But it's, while we're hoping that we're going to be able to do well as a party, for example, one of the big issues that we got is that we have to deal with the fact that in a lot of cases, people just don't want the incumbent to do well. Which is why, for me, I mean, a lot of what I've described just now is why I didn't have either election on my top 10, is because the French elections, it was important, but we just ended up in a status quo of a slightly reduced majority for Macron's party. And in Italy, we kind of got the protest vote with, like we said in previous editions, Meloni making all these promises, Meloni telling the people, I'm going to blockade Italy, scrap everybody, get rid of the EU. 3 days later, she was hugging and shaking hands with Metsola. 5 days later, she was with Ursula von der Leyen talking about how Italy was going to be a reliable partner, after having said, which is exactly what we all said would happen in previous episodes, after having promised that she's going to rip everything up and tell the EU to go do one.
Yeah.
I don't know if she exactly said that.
But she inferred it, you know, it's...
Fair enough.
Getting back on track, though, what have we decided here for our list? Because what I'm getting here is that we don't think that any of the individual elections per se really captured the trend we think that was underlying them throughout the year.
We can put election polarization as a topic, because like in front of us we have the three elections. I'm talking about a fourth one. So the three elections are the US midterms, the French, Italian, and I mentioned the Brazil ones. So I'm happy to put
elections
polarization, even though I do think the US midterms are an important topic to, even if only briefly, touch upon.
To separate. No, I actually do agree. What do you want to conclude?
No, I mean, I was actually going to say, I would say yes, election polarization as a topic on its own, but I would actually say the US midterms should be their own topic.
I agree.
Purely because the facts, and because I promised I was going to come back and do this
But
off.
let's first, where's your election polarization go before we get too off topic here? Maybe 9, 8-ish?
I mean, it has some degree of importance.
I mean, 9 still has some degree of importance.
Especially for me, the French election, because the actual results. I mean, at some point, people were actually fearing that Marine Le Pen could win, and this raised some perspectives for the next election. Not so much on perhaps on if she's going to win or not, because there is always that chance. But who is going to be the actual person that is going to replace Macron and lead in France? So this election, okay, it was a victory, clear victory, okay, and an important victory for the European Union and for the French people, in my opinion. But it looms questions for the future.
So where do we put it down? Because we'd like to talk around this.
Election polarization.
Election polarization.
Election polarization.
I'd say
okay.
4 maybe.
That high?
Oh, that high.
I think it's really important. I think it's a lot more important than people think.
I
Because
mean-
it's not just European; it's everything.
I mean, I think it is important. I think it is important, but I would settle with an 8.
I would agree with you.
I will settle with an 8 as well.
Okay.
The French
Can I get people
Eight.
to agree to 7 maybe?
8 it is.
No.
Shame on you all.
I'm just gonna type this one in because I didn't have it. But I promised you some time to rant about the midterms.
Okay, well, that's not ranting. It's
we're-
making constructive
If
points.
you're
Yes,
going
yes.
polarization, write it with the proper commission style guide. It's
well,
with
no,
an S, not with a Z.
in European
polarization.
These are so little used, you know. British English still?
He knows what's
European English,
happening.
European English. It's not British English anymore.
No.
We're co-opting it.
I write Canadian English and I've been enforcing that policy in all the
I mean,
documents
I
I've been
prefer
writing.
the term Brusselian English.
Listen, first of all, my condolences.
It's a
Second of all-
language.
But more seriously, I would say US midterm should be quite high, purely because of the fact that the red wave failed to materialize. The fact that the Democrats did much better than people thought they were going to do.
Mhm.
And the fact that it basically hamstrung Trump was really huge victories, because everybody's big fear was the next US elections, Biden, with a relatively shaky reputation, gets hit quite badly, gets taken out by Trump, and we have another 5 years of Trump shenanigans. But what's happened is with the failure of his effective failure to lead the Republicans to a victory, damaged his brand, had Fox News running away from him, and everybody is now running towards DeSantis, who, while he's not much better, is still at
He
least
is
slightly
an
more
Ivy League version of Trump, and
Yeah.
that version of Trump looks like he can win. He
Yeah.
got Florida like in a massive difference, and Florida is one of those places they could be.
It's swinging.
It's swinging, man. They
Yeah.
could be voting in the middle of the summer whether to buy a blanket or eat an ice cream, and the difference would still be 50.5, 49 point.
Yeah, sure.
But
point-
not in
point
this.
five.
But not in this case.
But not in this case,
Yeah, yeah.
because the guy, like, whether you agree or disagree with him, I'm not going to comment on that. I will comment that the way that he's playing the political game, the way that he's playing voters, he is talented. And first of all, we are seeing for the first time in history an opponent of someone essentially announcing their opponent's presidential campaign. Because Trump, by going through all these sanctimonious and all these attacks that he essentially built DeSantis, he's himself throwing DeSantis' hat in the ring for Republican candidate. And I think he's thinking it, we're thinking it, everyone is thinking it, that man is going to run.
Yes, but it's not the first time in history that happened. Carter did that way back in the day. And Carter basically announced someone else's campaign, which was very funny because Carter got his backside handed to him. But as I was saying in the first place, the reason it's important is that DeSantis is at least more responsible than Trump in several ways, purely because of the fact that he has more intelligence and he's not just playing populist TV style
He's more
politics.
institutional.
He's more institutional,
Yeah.
and that's less dangerous. We can work better with DeSantis than we could with Trump, because Trump was going to have a tantrum in one of 7 different ways. You know?
Yeah,
unless
because the big question,
DeSantis
though,
has
the big question-
learned from Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, he has
So-
clearly
so-
the
no,
way
no,
he's
no.
playing the anti-wokeism
Yeah.
crusade
Yeah.
demonstrates that he clearly has. But I just want to add another topic that I think was very crucial in flipping the elections. I think it was the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I think that really mobilized
The younger votes?
younger voters. I think it really mobilized women. And I just want to say, like, it's really disgusting what happened that in the 21st century we're having these discussions. Like, abortion should be constitutionally protected.
Pat in the back.
Which oddly enough, we're actually doing this in France right now.
Good.
Because
Good, man.
as a result of
Right,
this,
And more countries, should, especially in the West, man, we should absolutely be looking like we are talking about rights in other countries when in reality we're taking them away from half the population in our own.
I mean, I would like to also just add, just a crazy thought, why don't we start considering a European constitution?
We want to go back to 2004.
Let's
I don't
go.
know. I don't know.
He's getting PTSD.
Yes, we are too far away. We are too far away.
Placed European political community at number 5. So,
Yeah.
regardless,
Let's
as the
build.
only person in the midterms on their top 10, I will just say, did this midterms
No,
win?
actually, I also had it.
my
Yeah.
number 6.
I-
Mine is number
not.
7.
I said not in my top
Ah,
10.
okay, not.
Okay, carry on.
Continue.
You'll be very defensive for absolutely no reason.
Exactly.
It's
correct.
our Canadian English, man. It's not working.
If you switch to European English, we could understand you.
Yes.
Yeah, but what is Canada but not a better Europe, you know?
Well,
We have
America's
borders.
sister.
Oh, no, we're America's hat, as people like to say. But
How is hat better than a sibling?
Jesus, man.
regardless, I will just say, to play devil's advocate with the midterms, I don't know how much it actually impacted the European political calculus, because beforehand, I know we were all worried about how this would swing, how this would impact the relationship, and as soon as the results came in, it seemed like nobody cared anymore. We just kind of watched it turn and then watched the rubble build up.
But did
and
they really watch it turn?
And about the DeSantis point, did he need the midterms to build this wave? Yes, it solidified his election, or like his get that
His
seat in there,
strength.
Yeah.
his strength.
Yeah.
But I think another event could have also propelled them. I don't think these midterms were as significant as they've been in the past, because especially under Trump's presidency, I think that midterm was much more indicative of how the populace was kind of turning a bit against this wave or going
Well,
back.
I don't know, man, because
But
on that,
I will rest. I will
on that
rest
is
in
a little
public
bit of
opinion.
futurology, but first, I do think that the midterms help consolidate projecting DeSantis national-wise and
No, it's
international-wise, because even for us in Europe, we are starting to understand, okay, there is a guy there that can either be Trump or cannot be Trump.
Yeah.
Although, on regards to the midterms, we actually should try to understand and analyze it on this picture. So, did Biden win the elections, or the Democrats win the elections, or Trump lose it? So,
Yeah.
what are we discussing here?
On the other hand, I did a great
No, but
podcast.
it's important to know. I mean,
Yeah, it's true.
what is about this midterm elections? About Trump, or is it about the Democrats
And
winning?
if you want to hear the answer to that, I did a great podcast about that earlier this month, and we
Oh.
only have a few months left, a few minutes left in this big episode. So
Yeah.
where are we putting the midterm?
And also, just to wrap this up, and
Go ahead, last point.
yeah, and just it's still concerning the elections. We do not know. Thankfully, I still. Now you lost me. So you just start to interrupt me, and then I lose my line of thought.
Yes.
Shame on me.
So we still need to understand how it's going to play out with the Republican Party. So because many analysts, I don't know if Julien is on this opinion, but many analysts say that this fight between Trump and DeSantis can actually break the gap.
I agree.
And
Okay.
on that note, you say
So
6?
this is why this is important, not because of the actual context,
6.
but for the
6.
future.
6?
but 7,
No, I would say 7. I would say 7.
I will concur with 7 just because I'm the odd one out.
All right.
Okay, we have some big hitters still left in
Okay,
here.
we need to go on.
We need to go a bit
after
quicker,
the
too.
US. Yes, NATO expansion. Like I'm not even
Yeah, I agree.
debating whether it's in the top 10. I'm debating where.
9.
9.
I had it at
No.
8,
No.
but election polarization.
No. I agree with Nikos. I would go with a 4.
I would go 4 as well.
I had it at 3, so I'm happy to go with 4.
What?
Why?
This
why
is
not?
compromising. Thank you.
You have one
Brazilian
minute.
spirit.
One
We
minute.
have 1 minute.
1 minute to
Okay.
go. Not a 9.
Guys, it was important for Sweden and Finland, sure. And I was one of those people who was like, this is amazing,
Yeah.
great. For wider Europe, it wasn't existential.
I think
No,
it
no, but
is.
no. But I'm gonna place it on these terms. The accession to NATO of Sweden and Finland can turn out as a geostrategical checkmate
No.
Yeah.
to Russia.
Guys, I'm sorry, I'm having a
I
bit of a
disagree.
memory lapse. Can you remind me what 2 countries still haven't ratified the
Hungary and
accession?
Turkey.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Oh, listen,
much.
no, we're not going to Turkey now.
Hungary said they would though. So.
So did Turkey.
Anyway, we're putting it at number
No.
4. Your 1
No.
minute was duly
No,
received.
my
He
1
has
minute was
20 more
taken.
seconds. I'm
Yeah, 20
Oh,
more
you're
actually...
timing?
seconds.
20
Yeah.
seconds.
So, and the thing is as well, and if everybody read the French Dispatch, my publication covering French and European politics, I did a breakdown of NATO and Russian forces in general. For the rest of Europe, we didn't necessarily need them both to join. It wasn't existential for us. We still dwarfed the Russian military and most military
Yeah.
forces.
How about
entirely.
we rephrase this, Julien? Tell us why you think the European political community should go higher than NATO expansion.
Listen, guys. So,
And we could kill 2 birds with
Oh
one
no,
stone
no,
here.
this one will be nice.
Listen,
So how much
guys,
time are you giving him?
listen, I'm getting 10
Come on,
minutes.
come
I'm
on.
just going for one back.
Yeah.
But no, for me, the reason why it's so important is it represented a new dimension to European accession and European diplomatic engagement across the continent. It wasn't just EU, and we actually had a discussion about this recently, I think. But it's the reason why it's so important is that it's kind of gives us a vehicle, no, it de facto gives us a vehicle where we can overcome this EU/non-EU discussion where we have to keep negotiating between all these EU neighborhoods and non-EU neighborhood countries and non-EU countries, and where we bring together every single state in the EU to come together to find solutions to common problems. Where before, when we had the EU, which was hovering over everybody, there was a problem where there was a power asymmetry that made it difficult to negotiate certain outcomes and certain solutions to certain problems. Because, for example, Turkey felt bullied, or Bulgaria felt like bothered
like
because
they
it wasn't.
invaded half an
Listen,
island.
it's fine. I understand, but where like Ukraine, for example, felt like it was being pushed aside because it wasn't in any major European initiative. It kind of circumvents all of that to an extent, and on top of that, it represents a new attempt at finding solutions to the big issue, which is EU accession. We've tried to find a new situation to...
Germany came out
You just
today.
said it, the big issue, EU
Yeah.
accession, EU enlargement,
Yes,
which I
it's there
personally
too.
would place in the top 10 solidly.
No, it's in my top 10
solidly.
too.
Yeah,
It's in my top
and
10.
I think I would place that above EPC.
I
No
wouldn't,
contest.
purely
I
because
agree.
the fact that it's begun the accession process for 2 states that should have been accession states a while back. But this is more than likely, in my opinion, the vehicle that will get them through the accession process.
Or not allow them to finish it.
I'm not sure that we'll
is quite a
repeat those
statement.
mistakes.
I mean,
I think
as
Simon
a
should
red-
explain his
Look,
beliefs.
look.
I do. I'm just throwing out statements here, but no. I do think that the EPC is a way that can distract away from the EU accession and enlargement process, which I think should be more clear, more laid out, guide mapped, had good roadblocks in there, not roadblocks, markers. What I'm trying to say, pointers, yes,
Signs.
bullets, something like that. Clear, actionable, achievable things that people need to read.
Deliverables.
Achieve. Yes, and I'm disagreeing with every word
Yeah,
I'm
that-
saying here, but I feel like the EPC can distract from the ability of these states to really meet these.
But I disagree because we need it. Like sure, it's not taking a concrete form because they want to get every single actor on board. But when you think of the discussions that brought us to this point, effectively what we're seeing is the nascent stages of a future institution.
No. That's a little bit of a stretch.
This
That's
is what we are seeing.
That's a little bit of a stretch.
One more
No.
centimeter and that thing is gonna start flying everywhere.
That's fine. Listen, give it wings. Give it
Yeah.
wings.
No.
Let it fly.
I mean, we have extensively discussed this topic, like in the previous session. We had a very nice debate on that. And although I
people should go back and see it.
totally recommend you guys to do that. And I really respect Julian's opinion. but
But
I really do not. I cannot agree. Actually, it wouldn't even make my top 20 in the list, because I really believe that we at this point we do not need another forum which actually has no clear deliverables to present, that is too big to actually work. There is no clear framework for operating. There is no clear agenda, and it can be like a scapegoat for not making steps on the enlargement of the European
That's
Union.
what I was trying to say.
And a topic of interest, like, I mean, this is a French-led initiative that can actually be becoming like a rift between the French and the UK. So why would the other states be interested on this? I don't understand. On the plus side, because I promised that I will not only be the devil's advocate on
really
this,
took
on
the
this
gloves
one.
off there, I was gonna
Yeah,
say.
so no. I promise this. On the plus side, and reminding this community at least had the chance, had the good thing of sitting in the same room the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Okay, so
And I rest my case.
I agree. Do we think collectively should it make the top 10?
Yes.
no.
No.
Okay,
Ah,
there
come
we
on,
go.
guys.
The nays have it.
And EU enlargement,
no.
or where should EU enlargement go? If it goes on the top 10 at all.
Okay.
Give me a number first.
Taking your argument
Thank
that if we don't have the EPC, we have EU enlargement instead, I would say it should be 6.
6 is pretty. I would agree with that. It is actually.
Guys, I have to say, as great as all the progress that we did this year is, with Ukraine, with Georgia, with Moldova, hopefully soon with Bosnia and Herzegovina, with so many other countries that are very eager to
Even Turkey.
to no to enter our only democracies, man. To enter our family of member states. I think it has potential to be something big in 2023. 2024, no, because of the elections, but down the future, down the line. I mean, yes, we've made progress, but like, do you really think it's like, if we look at some of the other things there on the list, or even that people are thinking to themselves, there's things that are so much bigger. Because think about the bias, the European bias that goes in this.
We are in Brussels, though.
Yeah, we are, but
Says the
there
guy that
are
works at the commission.
other- Takes one to know one, my brother. Takes one to know one. But one thing that I tried to consider when I made my list was I tried to see where I can find topics that touched all the continents in the world. And I have to say, like, yes, massive steps forward, but I would put it number 3 if this year we said, like, yeah, we're granting membership to country X or country Y, but we didn't. So, like, I feel like there's a lot to celebrate, but there's a lot of work to be done. And before we do the big celebration, I think we need to roll up the sleeves, as the saying goes, and get down to work with the work that needs to be done.
I'm going to advocate for 10th place.
I was leaning that way too, because it's. I recognize the points. I am being swayed downwards.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I see the points of Nikos, and I think this is important not as an achievement itself, because it may just made like those 2 countries enter the list, did not make it like actual members, but it can make us think on what European Union we want to be in the future. And by this I mean, it is important to consider that we allow to enter this list 2 countries that are clearly on Russian sphere of influence. So increasing even more the tensions, and pointing out to the European future and how this can be important for our way forward. It's because it raises us structural challenge inside of the European Union, being this like if Ukraine enters the European Union, it can clearly reshape the balance of power inside of the European Union and the institutions, because you will need to do treaty amendments, okay, and you need to touch in specific policies. So, which this mean like having Ukraine entering, the balance of power and the gravity center will shift a little bit towards east. This because, for instance, in the EP,
Great point.
it would have either to be enlarged, or the members of MEPs, or the number of the MEPs will stay the same, but the power of other member states will be diluted inside. And this is something.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to reach there. I was going to reach. So this is something that should be thought about. You know, of how much do we want a country as big as this to enter the European Union, making us losing power? And again, it goes on the council. It would be the same. So the effects on the qualified voting majority, it would mean that, for instance, Poland and Ukraine, that have roughly the same population, would have the same power of vote combined as Germany.
Yes.
So imagine how this would actually shift the balance of power. And of course, just to touch very briefly, the cap. I mean,
Common agriculture policy.
Common agricultural policy. I mean, this was built. This is one of the core pillars of the European Union. French love it. I don't know why. Our neighbor Spain also love it. So I don't know
why. We like it so much.
Yes, you like very much agriculture. No. But let me wrap this, because otherwise I will never finish, because I love to talk about these things. So if Ukraine joins, it will mean that Ukraine, by now, not only has a very competitive worldwide agricultural system, but it represents 40% of its exports. So the way that cap is built nowadays, it means that the country that has more land, in this case is agricultural land, in this case is France, gets more payments, gets more funds. So imagine a country like Ukraine entering this.
Okay.
And the damage that could be done to the rest of the European Union in terms of fund distribution. And just to wrap it up very quickly, really quick. But just to offer you guys at least a solution, you know, at least a perspective forward, because realistically, the countries will not like this. This is how it goes. So either we amend the cap, or most likely the Ukraine will never enter. And by amending the cap, I would say, like, instead of we having more land, more payments rule, we should have like something like ecological and environmental objectives to replace the current criteria. It's just a food for thought.
Okay, so a long point to justify number 10.
He was essentially justifying the conference on the future of Europe by talking about.
That's also was gonna say.
I have to say.
I will say.
No, I'm sorry, but no.
You were talking about like we need to reform CAP. We need to reform.
But the conference of Europe is complete. Oh, come on, the conference of Europe is completely out of the scope of the European Union.
Treaty revision, man.
No, the future of Europe is the outside.
I'm sorry. No. Yes, no. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I will refrain. I will rephrase. I was referring to the thing that we dropped out. The community. Yeah, the EPC.
Yes.
Sorry. I misunderstood.
So
I misunderstood. You are right.
But see, here's an argument for not putting it at number 10. I would put the Conference on the Future of Europe at number 10 because it's out of these, it's one of the top 10 most important things purely because of the impact it will have politically.
Okay,
And
but then
So we would go number 9. And the enlargement could be go to number 10.
Sure, but I would also argue that all the structural challenges, all the financial challenges, all the political challenges that you've actually put in place for EU enlargement, particularly with Ukraine, actually merits it being higher than number 9, which is why I would sit it at number 6.
Okay, we can discuss that, but we're talking just about the enlargement.
Because we're linking these, should EU enlargement be 9 or 10?
I think it should be 10.
10? We'll put it 10.
I mean, if we put it at 10, we should just get rid of Conference on the Future of Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's one or the other. And there is a point that I've been waiting to raise, and we need to start I understand, wrapping up.
Progress. Apologies, it's a long episode.
Number 3. So just to let the people know, number 1 is Russia's illegal war of aggression in Ukraine. Number 2 is energy security. Number 4 is NATO expansion. Number 5 is food security. Number 3 needs to be the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. Because apart from the fact that some people may view it as something procedural or something bureaucratic, this has shown several things. Number 1, it has shown that nothing that has happened in China or internationally has dented Xi's grip on power. If anything, it has concentrated it even further. For the first time in China's history, we're seeing a Minister of State Security become a Politburo member. We're seeing that the Politburo and the Central Committee are all being filled with loyalists, which is something that China is completely moving away from its previous model. We're seeing a China that's becoming much more assertive with Taiwan, which is extremely important for the entire world. Because the first reflex that I had, the first one was how horrible that this is going on again in European soil and people are dying for absolutely nothing for a man's ego. And the second was that what's happening in Ukraine now is a testing ground, and China is looking with a very close eye, because they're thinking to myself, what Russia sees in Ukraine, I see in Taiwan. And what they see, our reaction to Ukraine, is what they might expect our reaction would be or could be in case of a similar situation in Taiwan. And that's incredibly important. Now, I'm not taking positions. I'm just saying that as an observation, it's extremely important to them, and it's becoming something that they're increasingly more aggressive on at home and abroad. So a lot of individuals that were strong reformists and market-oriented individuals at the high echelons of the Chinese Communist Party retired, sort of like a man by the name of Hu Jintao that was escorted in a very friendly manner out of the great hall of the people, as one might say. And loyalists were filled everywhere. And on top of all of that, we're witnessing now extremely prominent unrest and protests all across China. We're seeing it in Beijing, in Shanghai, in Wuhan, in Urumqi, in Xi'an, in Chengdu, in Shanghai. Even Hong Kong, I read today that it had awakened.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I when I wrote this point up, I thought it also symbolized the rise of Xi Jinping into his position of
the consolidation.
Yeah, as early consolidation. Yeah, definitely. I would perhaps say, looking at our current list, I know, Julien, you want to make a point. I would maybe lobby for 6, just because I think Inflation Reduction Act is still on the table. But Julien, you want to make some Chinese points.
I disagree. So,
not good enough.
One reason why I disagree is that nobody expected Xi to move. No one expected him to go as far as he did, but they expected him to consolidate his power anyway. He's been doing it since he got into power now. The reformers were basically all chased out regardless, or they decided that it was more profitable to them to fall in line regardless.
To their survival.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing really changed. I mean, a few people left, sure, but they were mostly doing what Xi told them to regardless, and he stopped listening to them 3 or 4 years ago. And because we're looking at what the big news for Europe was, what happens in China doesn't necessarily matter as much as we think to Europeans, because the fact that listen. The reason why is because we expect everything that happens in China to happen in China regardless. What happens in Europe actually has more of an impact on China, because the way that China is having to readjust its policy and its wolf warrior diplomacy to what happens in the West. I understand what you mean about the COVID thing, which I would say, if we're going for that argument, we should have COVID up there, not the 20th National Congress, because the Congress itself didn't change anything.
COVID was 3 years
and on
ago.
top of that, the issue as well is that sure, supply chains are important, but what happens with supply chains in China that impact Europe wasn't affected by this, because they're following the same line. You could argue that the next 5-year plan...
Lately?
I don't need to. I live in Brussels.
Exactly.
But what's happening is that the Congress itself hasn't changed anything. We can talk about China itself, which is important,
It's
but
a
it hasn't
sym-
changed anything.
It's a symbol.
Yes,
for
it's symbolic.
What
It's
yeah,
not impactful.
It's extremely
It's-
impactful.
it's- no, it's symbolic.
Because I was honestly like when they escorted the former Chinese premier
Yeah.
during the party congress, like that to me was.
It's symbolic.
If I may,
Sure.
it was a demonstration
I think
of fuck
what we
you
need
power.
here. What
Sure.
we need here is a tiebreaker.
But
vote.
it-
and Joao, you haven't said anything. Would you like?
But
to,
just
you
very
know,
quickly, it didn't actually
last one.
change anything industrially, economically, politically, or diplomatically for Europe. It was just, oh, Xi's consolidated power, so we just keep working with Xi.
But I think it might be the milestone we look back on as being the relevant one, where the textbooks say this is where it all started going. All right. But Joao, do you want to make a point on this?
I mean, both of you have actually very good points on that. I give you. On a scenario like a context point of view, Nikos has made his case clear. But on the other side, I don't know if it is like that really important. That that event per se. To actually be it is an important case, but actually to be making the list.
So you're not saying it should be in the top 10?
Maybe.
And these are the elections equivalent.
Yeah,
of
no,
China.
wait. You
Julie, that one over there.
you made your statement. I think you said the Chinese should go to third place. I think you said that in the beginning.
Yes.
I think what I'm saying is that I think it is an important subject, like context-wise, but I don't think it is worth to go to the third place.
Julien? Or Joao?
I could settle maybe because we still have inflation to speak about.
Rule of law.
Yes, we still have the rule of law.
Conference on the Future of Europe.
Yeah, so
German defense policy.
German
evolution.
defense policy. So I don't know. I
Guys
mean,
at 9.
I actually don't know.
I think for
Me too,
Europe
man.
itself, it doesn't actually matter
We have
more than the things out
decided.
there.
We have decided. We're
If-
settling for
I mean,
number 9.
No.
just to make
Oh,
we'll
no,
say,
no, I meant
Oh.
No, no,
9.
Oh, sorry.
because I still don't know. I mean,
Number 6, I think.
compared
is,
compared with, for instance, I don't know, compared with the German decision of increasing their spending, and compared to the inflation, because I think they actually deserve to be on the top 10 list.
And
I
even
don't
the rule of
know-
law cuts.
Yes, and you
Fund
still,
cuts.
yes, and you still have the fund cuts. But I mean, okay,
That-
we
that
will discuss about
needs
we'll
to
discuss
make-
about that. I will say maybe I'll vote, and this time I will be overruled. But I will say that it stays out.
I agree, 100%. It should not be on the top 10.
No, man.
Maybe 19th, maybe even
Guys,
36th.
I heard someone say that it's a
Guys,
tiebreaker, so I think
NATO was making, apart from the fact that the organization was built to contain the Soviet Union back then, the new Cold War is very clearly to the east, irrespective of what's happening.
okay,
That's
I,
fine.
I do
but
agree.
The Congress
I
didn't
do-
change that.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Congress demonstrated that.
No, it
but
was
it
already
was something that we
prevalent.
already
No,
knew. I mean,
it's-
Alright,
it
we-
was
we
something
do
that
need
was
to
already
start
there.
moving.
I actually
We
go
need to
with.
start moving on. So
Oh man.
I really want to
Inflation
I
number
would
3.
actually-
all your points.
Yeah.
Honorable mention for now.
Inflation
I-
number.
I-
Which one here do you
Inflation
think
number 3.
Inflation number 3. Tim.
Inflation number 3, we can agree.
Okay.
Inflation or Inflation Reduction Act?
Inflation.
The inflation, yes.
I think-
We will
I
speak
think
about that
Inflation
now.
Reduction Act falls under.
Inflation?
I actually would like to separate the two cases, but I will make a stand for that.
Okay. Okay, so inflation number 3, that was a quick
Yeah.
decision. We still have left, just to run over it. I mean, we cut out COP27. We have Conference on the Future of Europe, the German defense policy, and Hungary rule of law, which I think are the key standouts, as well as your weird DMA, DSA shout. But
It's not that weird, man.
That was weird, man.
It's so important. Look, guys, come on. It's transforming the way businesses are going to operate in Europe. Come on.
Yeah, but
but-
that's exactly it. In
And you
Europe.
think the Congress is more important to Europe than the
yeah,
DSA?
Yes.
I agree actually.
Yes,
It's- yeah, it's our strategic future. You know, it's a direct power rivalry. But regardless, we close
But
the
it's
book
not
on
direct.
that.
They fight with America. Currently, we don't have the geopolitical
Man,
power
what
to be
about
considered
the
direct rival.
Chinese alleged or whatever Chinese police stations in
Yeah.
European member
Yeah.
states?
Yeah.
Like,
That's a completely different issue. That's not the Congress.
I had it in my honorable mentions.
That, yes, in the honorable
is
mentions,
it
I would.
though? Is it?
Regardless, we decided, and we have 2 spots left, number 6 and number 9.
EPC.
Can I go for number 9?
Rule of law.
Maybe it's
Go for it.
so because I think the other guys have a better claim for the 6th spot than I do, so I will concede on that. And for the number 9, I would say like German defense policy revolution.
I don't think anything. It was really hyped up in February, and I just didn't see like the substance.
Again,
of
it is something. I think it's kind of an historical event. First, let's see this.
It could be.
Yes, it could be, but in a way, it also is. Because yeah,
That's everything. Could be.
No.
But in a way, it is.
No. But you will see. At least I hope that my arguments are convincing enough for this. So Germany reunified, thanks to the accords and the concessions that they made, that they will not be spending a lot of money in the military, and they will be like constraining the military up to 360,000 personnel. This was, and also like renouncing having a nuclear bomb. These were the agreements set back in the 90s. Nowadays, we see a completely different political context internationally, and we see very subtly Germany falling back on the promise that they made back in the 90s. That was a clear condition for unification. Maybe nowadays we have a different look towards Germany, but traditionally Europe always feared the increased military power of Germany. And this can actually be a response to another thing. I think we all agree that this crisis shown that Germany's influence was mainly economic and soft power wise. And their dependence was proven yet again, and their bad political choices, because they relied a lot on Russia. Nowadays, maybe they are trying to compensate, and in the future we could see like more assertive Germany in the political international sphere, and also in Europe, because they actually have hard power. And also, just to wrap it up, they reached the 2%. They want to reach the 2% that was promised by all the member states of NATO, by all the members of NATO.
As a country that actually fulfills that 2% quota, coming from one of those countries, it's easier said than done. Because you can't go from having 1 point something to 2 from one year to the next. This is unfortunately not a wartime
But they can.
economy. Can they? Because how much of those investments have actually materialized? Do you know?
I mean, I still do not know. They have
Around
no, but they
20
have other priorities now.
Exactly.
So they have the energy crisis. They
And
have,
we don't know
So
what happens when eventually, at some point, the war in Ukraine ends. Of course, it should be on the terms of Ukraine and under no pressure from anybody else. But at some point, the war will end. So I don't know if we lose the momentum then, because I'm more excited to see what we as a European Union have to do, like joint procurement schemes.
For what? For military?
Yeah, for equipment.
And this can actually be ruining the things, because up until now France has been the leading proponent for an European army.
I think
Okay.
integration is the right
Nowadays, if Germany actually decides to balance up the scales, let's see how it goes.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just.
You know,
Julien did
this
brief
could
last
actually
word.
have a lot of impact, not only historically, but also structurally in the European Union. That's why I do believe that this is an important moment in
Fair
our
points.
recent
I
history,
recognize. I think that's a great.
and
point
that
to
it
bring up.
should be going to the ninth.
I
spot.
give Julien the last point, and then if you could take a minute, and then we'll collectively decide.
I'm the tiebreaker this time.
I agree that we need to wait and see what happens, because you're right, we need to see how they actually deliver on these promises, because the SPD led coalition has a habit of promising things and then falling over repeatedly. But I agree that it's historical purely because of an ideological shift where Germany is finally comfortable with the idea of being a military power. And at the European development, the level of European development when it comes to the military side of things, that's important purely because we can't have a multi-speed military Europe.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Politically and economically and in terms of accession, it sort of makes sense. Militarily, it's dead. So the fact that Germany has kind of reached the same point as France, Poland, Italy, Spain, and Romania, the major military powers in Europe, it means that all the further developments ideologically, normatively, and in terms of just raw defense procurement wanting to go in this direction has happened. And on that sense, I would actually say it should probably be a 6 if we take it from the European point of view. However, one big problem that we have.
Shiver in my spine, man. What was that?
One thing that's I don't know. I was gonna make a stupid joke, but I'm not even gonna bother. But
Did you
one
turn
problem.
the AC in here? Like it's
We have
cold,
I'm
man.
telling you with the.
Or is someone just saying bad jokes?
Please continue.
One problem that we have, however, is that Germany isn't taking European cooperation at defense level and procurement in general. And despite the jokes from the Greek, the issue that we have is that the
European.
Germans are continuing to buy equipment from non-European procurement. We still have the issue where a German-led procurement drive for anti-air defenses and munitions went to the US and to Israel. You know, is it really revolution if they keep doing everything they've been doing on that front as well?
And Turkey.
And Turkey too.
So, just to finish this off then, should it be on the list? Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
I think it's a great point. I mean, you make great arguments, but no.
Yes.
I didn't make
I
any.
do believe it should stand 9.
And I think we cut off the Chinese Communist Party to appease too much of ours displeasure, so we'll cut it off here because we still have 2, I think, left. The Conference on the Future of Europe or Hungary Rule of Law. And I think, does anybody have any objections between either of those 2 making the top 10?
I would prefer to maintain the German defense
But
policy.
it's sadly, it's been cut.
Oh, it has been decided.
it has
Oh,
been
okay.
decided.
Can we at
Okay.
least play rock, paper, scissors?
I gave you last time.
Like, Joao, you
Okay.
Come on, man.
fight
Okay.
for
Okay, it will
Here we
be. It
go.
will be
We're doing this
interesting.
by rock, paper,
Rock,
scissors.
paper, scissors, snap. On snap we go.
Okay.
Rock,
1, 2,
paper,
3.
scissors, snap. Count.
Come on.
Rock, paper, scissors, snap. Yeah, it's out.
It's out.
Damn.
You have the team
Fair
done
is
now.
fair.
Damn.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Okay, Hungary Rule of Law. Is it 6 or 9?
9.
9?
Under protest.
6.
6?
Sorry.
Just on strike for the rest of the
Yes, I'm gonna be on strike. 9.
9? I think 9's win then. We'll put it at 9 then.
I still think that the Germans should stay there.
And
6?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I
but
really like. I mean, between Hungary rule of law and Germany,
what?
I think it is more important.
I'd be willing
German-
to entertain Twitter at number 6.
No.
Because it's fun.
No. Listen, the tech bro nonsense is no.
No, but like I think
I do think it's a big event, right?
it's a big event because jokes aside, I don't think it's actually
top
fun. I think we are seeing a person with a lot of money, not afraid to stand up for whatever it is that he believes his version of freedom of speech is, and we're pushing the limits of not just European legislation for the internet, given that you also mentioned the DSA and the DMA, because he said, first of all, he's let go of his entire, and some resigned, but he's let go of his entire staff in Brussels, which means that abiding with very complex EU legislation of the digital space is not going to be easy for a company like Twitter. He seems to be pushing the boundaries of what is okay in the United States as well, and we're entering a bit of a specific, let's say, time, a very critical juncture in terms of cyber, digital freedom of speech.
You've made your pitch. We'll only do yes or no on this. Should it be in the top?
No.
Should it be 6? No?
I don't agree,
It will not be in the
and
top
I still
6.
protest
Oh,
about the
man.
German defense
It's-
policy.
We have to cut it.
We're trying to
We have to
claim
cut it,
that the 6th most important thing that happened this year in Europe is a rich man flailing like a lunatic and about to get kicked off of every Apple device in the world and
Yes.
probably kicked out of Europe.
Yes, I
That's
totally
not important.
agree with Julian's
What is
point.
this?
I mean,
It's like seeing a crazy man in the middle of the streets, like rolling around and being like, yes,
Regardless,
our leader.
let's restore some sanity. I think the shout that most deserves to be 6 from our remaining options is Conference on the Future of Europe.
No, man, it's too high.
Hey, you voted down the GDPR, so
I mean, for me, just to wrap this thing, I think like the conference I would strike out Hungary rule of law. I would place there the German defense policy.
No.
And
No.
I would have the conference on.
I would actually put
6.
Hungary.
Okay, conference 6.
No, Hungary.
No, but
six-
under this condition, huh?
Actually, I would agree that, Conference on the Future of Europe needs to be up there, not because, again, it may not actually become the most important thing in Europe. It may not actually be something that changes Europe fundamentally, but it changed the discussion. It brought in the population.
Yes.
It changed the
Yes.
discussion on treaty change because it became more acceptable purely because everybody saw, actually, people kind of want this. And it also brought in a lot of discussions regarding, for example, the veto. They're now actually seriously discussing in the council how they can get rid of the veto to respond to these aims.
QMV.
I will propose something.
It could go for 6 for me. I just would like to understand and to hear from you guys the argument on the rule of law, because we didn't we just decide. Okay, it goes there, and
I'm okay to.
Let's put it 6, and then we'll briefly explain rule of law. Then.
Yeah, 'cause I
Julien,
can-
do you want to take that?
So from my point of view, I personally, if we'd had the German defense policy revolution, I would have actually had that at number 9 instead.
yeah.
But because the dictators to my left decided that it had to be gone.
It was really.
This-
I mean, talking about
I see.
rule of
And
law,
exactly.
and then they just
Rule of
say,
law.
they
So
just
by
say,
the way-
okay, we unilaterally on this side of the table decide that
cut out China.
Hungary is going inside.
It has nothing to do with anything.
I
Like,
mean,
come on.
we didn't even discuss what type of democracy is this.
Yes, exactly. It's a Chinese
Huh?
democracy. Apparently.
Yes.
Brilliant.
But the reason why I'd say rule of law should be at number 9 is because the fact that, like I said earlier on, the fact that we have Hungary finally being punished and having funding cuts, which will damage Orban's position in a critical juncture of his dictatorship, and will embolden pro-European forces in this country. And I've got this from friends of mine who are activists out there. It has a big impact because you have the Commission and the EU institutions finally saying, okay, you want to keep doing this and lying to us and disrespecting EU fundamental rights and fundamental concepts like democracy and political freedom, then we will cut off your funding. Because we know that Orban is almost entirely dependent on EU funding right now.
We need to close by 9.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. Sorry, can I just make a small? It's not about punishing anyone.
It is though.
100%. No, it's about upholding the law and the European acquis, and they're different things. Because you sign up to be a member of this family, you trade in something to receive something else.
And then
Obviously,
when you don't,
Exactly, but this is not
You get
about,
reprimanded. It's
about
punishment.
punishment. No.
De facto.
This is about justice. It's different. And that's why it's specifically on the rule of law that the funding cuts are taking place. Because this is not about vindictiveness, this is not about revenge.
punishment's not necessarily
or
vindictive.
vengeance. It's very much about justice. And it's also very historic because for the first time, the EU has chosen to the Commission, together with subsequently the institutions, are in the process of cutting not all, some of these funds, and it's clear because there are areas of the acquis that is not being respected.
But linguistically, the argument doesn't hold up because you talk about justice, which is a legal concept, and in the law, when you break the
Justice is
law,
not a
you're
legal
punished.
concept.
Well, let's we've decided on the
It
list.
can also be
We need to
philosophical.
wrap up sometime.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
And
even then.
No, but what I mean is, I still
You
say-
mentioned German Defense Revolution again.
Sorry.
There we go, and the list is done. And I will read out the list one final time. No complaints. I know we're all leaving this very happy.
I'm okay.
So at number 1 is the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine. Number 2 is energy security. Number 3 is inflation. Number 4 is NATO expansion. Number 5 is food security. Number 6, somewhat surprisingly, conference on the future of Europe.
Yeah, that
rose
is-
through the ranks. Number 7 is the U.S. midterm elections. Number 8 is the trend of election polarization, spelled with an S, not a Z, apparently. Number 9 is Hungary rule of law funding cuts. And number 10 is EU enlargement. And that is our top 10 political stories of
Guys, we did
2022.
it, and in sub 2 hours. I'm proud of us.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to last this long. Should we, just before we wrap up, do you think any of our lists were actually close to this?
On my list, I only had out the German defense policy.
Really?
Yes, the rest I have everything. Aside from the Italian elections and the French elections, because we decided to join in together.
Mm-hmm.
So the rest I have everything.
Mine lists two, actually. I'm only missing one, which is the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party.
Guys, we'll do an episode on what we expect
That's why
to happen
remember his
in
argument. That's why I said we scrapped the Chinese Congress, and now we're going to scrap this
a
one.
very unpleasant conversation in 2023. I hope that we won't, but I'm afraid we will.
Listen,
Yeah.
what China does is not dictated by the Congress, it's dictated by Xi, who
Hey,
is staying in place anyway.
I didn't mention anything or anyone.
Well, on
And
that
tune in
note,
on the
we
next
need to
episode.
start wrapping up. I think we've passed the hour and a half mark. So thank you
Yes,
if
we
you're
did.
still watching, if you're still listening. We appreciate the support. Drop a like, drop a subscription.
Share the video.
Thank you. And yeah. I
And
guess-
subscribe.
Yes, I mentioned that.
Yes.
Thank you. It never hurts to reiterate. And thank you to my lovely panelists amongst me for spending their torturous Tuesday night going through this for 2 hours.
I
It's a
could not
pleasure.
imagine a
It's
better
fun.
way to spend my Saturday.
Yes, I do agree.
It's a fun time.
It's
Okay.
my Tuesday.
On that note, I think we're wrapping up. So goodbye, everybody.
Ciao, guys.
Goodbye.
Give it in, boys.
Chinese Congress. Are you out of
We
your
did-
mind?
we did- we
Are
didn't-
you out
we
of your
didn't
mind?
speak- we didn't speak
Hey,
about
don't leave me
the.
hanging, bro.
I'm gonna